Hello, everyone. Welcome back to the Centimetre Perfect AFL podcast. Liam, I don't know about you.
Okay.
I love Brownlow Week.
Do you?
I think while the award can be so silly sometimes, it's always very fun. That little build-up, who's going to win, who's going to be the upset winner, is the favourite going to dominate? I love it. Which team is going to poll less votes than the medalist? It's all very fun. It's all very silly. And Liam, today on the Centimetre Perfect AFL podcast, I thought we would do something a little bit different to maybe some of our normal deep dive content that we produce here. Okay. I'm going to talk about 5 Brownlow medal winners that I think don't have the historical placing they deserve.
Okay.
And the same historical reverence that maybe some other legends of the game have earned. I think these 5 deserve a better place amongst the greats than they maybe have.
Yeah.
And we're going to talk about them.
I love how you've just dived straight into it, Jesse. You've skipped all the preamble. We've got to do all the fun stuff like @CMPerfect_AFL.
We've got to hook the listeners in, Liam.
Straight away. @CMPerfect_AFL, Instagram, YouTube, Spotify, Apple, Amazon for the main podcast as well. But we are, Jesse, it's another deep dive. We are back again. We're talking Brownlow winners, the underappreciated Brownlow winners, the ones you may have forgot existed. I had for one know, Jesse, when you gave me this list to compile the old graphics with, I read down this list and I have potentially heard of 2 of these people.
That's a great start.
Yes.
There's 5 people here.
There is 5 people here. So yes, underappreciated. You forgot. Do I have to have known who they are before I forgot them? Is that a rule?
Yes.
Okay, so then I have no idea who 3 of these people are, which is fantastic, Jesse. That's why you're here. You're the smarts. You're the smarts. You know this stuff, Jesse. So we'll kick off from the very tippy top with, we're going back to the 20s, Jesse. We're going right back to the 20s. We're talking about Ivor Warne-Smith.
That we are.
Dear listeners, have you heard of Ivor Warne-Smith? Leave a comment down below if you have. He won the Brownlow 1926, 1928, the first ever dual winner of the Brownlow medal. Jesse, tell us a little bit about Ivor. Very Australian name, Ivor.
Very. Brownlow medal winner number 3 and 5, Ivor Warne-Smith, one of Melbourne's fearsome squad members during that 1920s run, where they were actually quite good, and had it not been for a generationally elite Collingwood side under Jock McHale in the latter part of the 1920s, I suspect we would see a much bigger trophy cabinet for the Demons. They were very good during this period. It's just unfortunate for them that McHale and the Coventry boys and the Collier boys were better, and they were very, very good.
So I have Jock McHale to blame for me never hearing of Ivor Warne-Smith. Is that right?
You've got yourself to blame.
Fair enough.
Okay.
Fair enough. He's the first ever Melbourne Premiership captain, though, Jesse, in 1926. That's a pretty good little stat for his name.
It is the last premiership before Collingwood's four-peat from 1927 through to 1930. So, we talk about that. Smith continued to captain the club beyond that, was captain coach during the latter part of the 20s and early 30s as well. And in 1932, Liam, he would fill in when the players weren't available. He wasn't technically meant to be playing, but if they were short, I would just pull on the boost and say, you know what? I'm a 2-time Brownlow medalist. Rather me than the bloke in the cheer squad. I'm going on.
That was quite common for back in the day, wasn't it?
It was, but can you imagine that happening now? Just Sam Mitchell saying, oh, well, Warps has gone down. We need some inside mid-grunt. I'm going on.
Yeah. Oh, look, why not? I mean, it could happen. You pulled the jumper off at the night of the elimination final, said, I'm going out there. Why can't these guys? It's completely fine. He was chairman of selectors as well for Melbourne in 1956, 55, 56, 57, and 59 premierships. How have we? I keep saying how have we? How have we never heard of this person? he's got a rap sheet as long as my arm.
I would say it's a couple of things.
Okay.
Warne-Smith, while being the first dual winner of the medal, was immediately overshadowed by the deeds of Hayden Bunton, Dick Reynolds in the 1930s. And it very quickly became difficult to hold his position up historically when those 2 guys came immediately after him. It was also an era where forwards had a lot more gravitas as well. So Gordon Coventry, who we said before, Bob Pratt are in that era as well. And also the fact that Melbourne, as we mentioned, they won that 1926 flag, but they didn't kick on with it. Collingwood just took over. And that makes it hard because you're trying to balance that historical relevance with premierships, which I think is ultimately a very good marker of team success and elite star player success, but not always. In terms of that chairman of selectors run, he was Norm Smith's biggest confidant within the Ds during that run. None of that is possible without Norm Smith. Equally, none of it's possible without Warne-Smith as well. Both were equally important, and he was a key part of the Demons until his passing. which wasn't long after that 1959 premiership, either within a few years. And also a dual war veteran. He enlisted underage, lying about his age in World War One to fight for Australia, and then also rejoined for World War Two as well, surviving both.
Well, I used to love how back in the day that they were so keen to fight for the country, they would just lie. It wasn't uncommon. A lot of them used to lie about their age, and Ivor One-Smith was one of them.
Well, he was initially rejected for his World War II service because he was too old. So clearly an anti-Geelong bias at the selectors for World War II, because that's something an anti-Geelong person would say. You're too old, and then Ivor One-Smith said, "No, I'm not, mate. Put me in."
Put me in. All right, we're going to skip now ahead many decades. We're going into the 2000s, into 2002. We might go back in time again. We'll see. And we're talking about Simon Black, one of the players I have heard of.
I would hope so.
Yeah, I would hope so too. But he won in 2002. Won his medal as being part of one of the most dominant teams in AFL history, the Brisbane Lions, back in those early 2000 years. And look, I remember very fondly watching the Lions back then. You got Acker running around like a maniac, the Scott brothers going crazy. God, what a team that was. It's been a while since we've had a team like that. I remember them all being just massive as well. Like, I just felt like all the Brisbane team back then were just like this. Not Simon Black, though. What can we say about Simon Black?
I think Simon Black is one of the most skillful midfielders to ever play the game. And the reason he's in here, like, realistically, people of kind of, let's say, 20 years old plus will almost certainly know who Simon Black is if they've casually followed the game. So we're not saying, oh, you've never heard of him. But in this is more of a case of his greatness and his quality probably doesn't get the respect it should. And I think when you think back about how dominant that Brisbane team was, Michael Voss, Simon Black, Nigel Lappin, Jason Ackermanis, the Scott brothers, Luke Power, you're rattling off 7-8 names that can run through the midfield. It is extraordinary. And that's notwithstanding the spine and the star forwards, your star defenders, and everyone else in between. It was such a good team that, while Michael Voss certainly is the most recognisable of those names, and there is no doubt he was a phenomenal player, but there was not a more skillful player in the team, and I would argue in the competition for that time than Simon Black. Not only was he dominant, Liam, during the spell of Brisbane's success, he was the one that kept going as the Lions kept going down the ladder following that. He was the one that's continued to stand up. He was a co-captain after Michael Voss retired, and Liam, as you know, he was brilliant towards the end of his career as well, continuing to figure in Brownlow medal counts down the track.
Well, 2007, 2008, Jesse, he was second in the medal count both those years. And I'm guessing that was towards the twilight of his career, correct?
Retiring in 2013, so definitely towards that in theory, that downward trend time commencing, finishing second to Bartel in 2007 and Adam Cooney in 2008. They are two very, very solid seasons.
And if you went to a trivia night, Jesse, if I went to a trivia night, I should say, and there was a question, who was the record games holder for the Brisbane Lions, Simon Black would not be on my list in my head of people I would go through, but he is. He is the Brisbane all-time games record holder, which is something that I've learned today, which is very fun as well. Always learning. It's very fun. Anything else to say about Simon Black, Jesse, before we move on?
He's done that pretty well for himself as a private coach and developing talent outside of your traditional AFL assistant elite academy setup. He's gone his own thing and been quite successful in that. And more importantly, he's an East Fremantle boy.
Oh, of course he is. Of course he is. Oh, dear. All right, let's move on to the next of our list of 5. And we're going back to the 70s, Jesse. Back when elbows to the head would get you 1 week if you're lucky. Graham Moss, who won the medal in 1976. He won in 1976, his final VFL season. He played 4 in total. Where else did he play after that, Jesse? Or before that even?
Well, this is where it gets a bit fun, because back in the 70s, Len, not only were elbows to the head encouraged, and halftime was beer, the sandful and the waffle were equal competitions to the VFL. And this is something I would love to do in the off-season, Len. Have a chat about some of these guys who dominated Western Australia and South Australia at the time the VFL was on that level footing, and where would they rank amongst the greats? Well, Graham Moss was one of the few that actually crossed. Many did for brief spells, but also very few had the impact that Graham Moss did on Essendon. Just the 4 seasons there from 1973 to 1976, winning the medal in his final season. He came from Claremont in the Waffle. He would leave for Claremont in the Waffle. He would easily be the greatest Tiger that Claremont have had, I would say. Revered at the club. They really should name the ground after him. Forget Revo Fitness Stadium. That should be the Graham Moss Stadium. He is that significant for Claremont, given they've never really been a dominant club in the waffle, but they were with Graham Moss, and that he was that guy. He was that damn good for them. And Liam, as you are about to tell us, he was that damn good at the Bombers as well.
Yes, Jesse, of course. Despite playing just 4 seasons, he's considered one of the greatest Bombers of all time, Jesse. One of the greatest Bombers of all time. Better than Hurd.
Bombers of all time.
Better than Lloyd.
Well, I suppose that depends on how you slice it. But in terms of rucks, you'd only have probably Simon Madden ahead of him.
Okay. Oh, he's a ruck,
Simon
was he?
Madden, he was. And you're talking to a guy, and Simon Madden played 370 games for the Bombers.
Wowee. A ruck winning the Brownlow medal?
There was a few.
Not in my lifetime.
Yes, in your lifetime.
Max Gorn.
No, well, he hasn't won a medal. Scott Wine did.
Scott
Jim
Wine?
Steins did.
Jim Steins. I know Jim Steins. Why is Scott Wine on this list? I don't know who that is.
Because he wasn't as good as these 5.
Fair enough, Jesse. I'm getting a bit silly now. My apologies. I'm getting a bit silly now. Anything else to say about Graham Moss there?
I think, in terms of 4-season stints, impact, you'd struggle to find maybe a better one. Interestingly, I still have had a few of these guys, obviously for different reasons. John Coleman would be one of the names that spring to mind. And that players who have had very brief VFL AFL careers relative to others haven't quite kicked on. For other stories, Liam, about brief VFL AFL careers that broke records and set legacies, check out our deep dive on Peter Hudson in our channel, because that was quite a fun one for not an Essendon player.
That's true. And he was one of those ones who went off and did other things and came back as well, didn't he? He went off and just gallivanted all over the place. Good old Hudson. Well, nice job. All right, let's move on to Bill Hutchinson. We're going back in time again, Jesse. We're going back to the 50s, 1952 and 53, back-to-back Brownlows for Bill. Third player to win consecutive medals up until that point, which is pretty exciting. What's to say about Bill?
Another player who is really sandwiched in that awkward period, because the 50s wasn't the best time for the VFL. There was the rise of the Victorian Amateur Football Association, which had a very different, very experimental gameplay. They weren't as strong in the 50s as they would be in the 70s, but there was starting to be some competition around. Also, coming off the war years, things weren't great for the competition. I think a lot of the stars of that era, because they weren't Ian Stewart, Bob Skilton, although Bob Skilton does transcend into the 50s, but they weren't those guys. They also weren't your Dick Reynolds, your Hayden Buntons from before the war. So you get this kind of awkward vacuum where brilliant players from that specific decade, the 50s, don't always get the plaudits that they probably should. And Hutchinson's squarely in the mix of here. He was dominant for the Bombers for a long time, and prolific in premierships, and also almost became another Triple Brownlow medalist. Liam. He was very, very good.
Well, four-time premiership player, Jesse. That's a lot.
That is a lot.
Some people were lucky to get one. So it's very good for him. Yes, and obviously finished second in 1955. So you're right, very close to a triple threat, which is no one has ever. Sidebar, Jesse. Mm-hmm. Has anyone ever gone 3?
Won 3 Brownlows?
Yes.
Yes.
How many people?
Bunton, Reynolds, and Skilton.
I mean, that's a very small sample size of a very, very big and long competition. Shame we couldn't get there. But he was called the greatest bomber of all time by the actual greatest bomber of all time, Dick Reynolds, Jesse.
Yeah, I've taken some license in that, and I've just decided that Dick Reynolds is the greatest of all time. But sure. He is. But that says it all. That Reynolds, when accepting the award that he was bestowed, said that the actual greatest bomber of all time was Bill Hutchinson. I think the words he used were the effect of, whoever's given me this never watched Bill Hutchinson play.
Yeah, fair. I mean, look, I take it from the mouth of the professionals, to be honest with you. And look, if you're getting those plaudits from another great, you take that, wouldn't you? You would take that. Anything else to say about Bill, or should we move on to our last?
Let's do our lucky last.
Greg Williams, Jesse. Old Greg. I'm not sure why I said old Greg. Probably a Mighty Boosh thing. If anyone knows that, my apologies. Came to my head. Do you know Mighty Boosh, Jesse?
I do not.
Fair enough. He won in 1986 and 1994 at 2 different clubs. The first on this list to do so, I'm assuming, at Sydney and Carlton.
Not the first in history, but the only one on this list.
On this list, yes, correct. At Sydney and also Carlton. Tell us a little bit about Greg.
Well, for those of a certain vintage, they will tell you until they're blue in the face that Greg Williams is one of the most talented players I've ever seen play. Unfortunately for Greg Williams, he was also one of the crankiest. And he was probably around about 5 years too late for a lot of it to pass. He's a weird one, Williams, because played his footy at Bendigo, Was in Carlton's VFL zone, was ignored, went to Geelong, won at best and fairest. Tom Hafey was coaching Geelong at the time. He was sacked at Geelong, went to Sydney. Williams followed him up there. Wins the Brownlow in his first season up north at the Swans. Plays there for a couple of seasons, wants to go back to Victoria. It was Carlton or St Kilda. This is where it gets interesting again. Okay. St Kilda's trade offer included two-time Brownlow medalist Robert Harvey.
Oh, wow.
But the Swans, but obviously before he was two-time Brownlow medalist Robert Harvey.
Of course.
Swans said no. Swans went with Carlton's offer. So there he went to the Blues. And Carlton, who have an incredibly rich history, they wouldn't have many players better at football than Greg Williams. Yet he was almost the victim of being in the wrong era twice, in my view. His aggression and his tenacity and his temper probably placed him 2 years too late. But his skill, his ability to accumulate the ball and to bring his teammates into the game while still being dominant himself. I mean, you put him 10 years later, get him into the 2000s, you're talking about a guy that's probably better than Chris Judd in that regard. You put those two against each other in the midfield, I'd take Diesel.
Well, I mean, you say that you chuck him a couple of decades later, but even back then, Diesel was suspended for 34 games by the AFL Tribunal, Jesse. You said it was cranky. I didn't know it was that cranky. He was subject to 2 separate salary cap scandals from his time at Sydney at Carlton. So he was cranky and also a bit dodgy.
I don't think he was dodgy. I don't think we can legally blame Greg Williams. So that's a disclaimer for the law. I'm also not sure we can legally blame the clubs. So allegedly. Although it was proven twice. Okay. Sydney with under the table payments, Carlton with under the table payments. Part of those under the table payments is what brought down Carlton in the early 2000s when the penalties got wound out for a lot of under the table player payments that were going on during that time. It says a lot that someone is so good that clubs are willing to check the salary cap twice in order to get him. And he really was, in my opinion, Liam, the best pure midfielder of the 1990s.
34 games in the 90s, Jesse. How many weeks would that equate to with inflation?
Well, under the current ruling, I don't think. Well, Greg Williams got 250 games. He should have played 300. He wouldn't have played 150 if he kept his behavioural problems in the modern era. Let's put it that way.
You're a big fan of Diesel, I can tell, though. You like
Huge fan. He definitely had his moments that he'd be less than proud of on the field. And, you can't talk about Diesel without the unfortunate or the very poor racist abuse towards Chris Lewis at West Coast in the mid-90s. So, far from the perfect character, we're not here to glorify that type of behaviour, but we are here to, I think, pay a bit of respect to the on-field plaudits of Diesel because I think, rightly or wrongly, his behaviour and his antics have detracted from his overall legacy. Those who were Sydney fans or Carlton fans broadly love him, but there's equal arguments for those fans of opposition teams that had to play against him. They may not be the biggest Diesel fans, and that is fair enough. But ultimately, as a footballer, almost peerless in the 90s, in my view. At his peak, at least.
Very good, Jesse. I love it when you get passionate about these things. It's really nice for me as someone who likes to learn about the game to come and listen to you, wax lyrical about these players from the past because you're a very learned young man, aren't you?
Thank you.
It's very good. You love your footy. It's great.
I do love my footy.
You do love your footy. Anything else to add to our little list, Jesse, before we wrap up our little deep dive here today?
I think we should do more Brownlow content, Liam. So if you want to see us talk more about the intricacies of the Brownlow medal, there's lots of good content out there on YouTube about the Brownlow as well. I'll give a shout out to Gazman, who does a lot of historical videos. He's got a couple of cool pieces on the Brownlow. Even if I don't agree with necessarily the fact that he thinks the Brownlow medal is bad, I still think there's a very interesting historical tidbits there. So go check that out. That's Gazman on YouTube. He provides some very interesting videos of this nature. So go check those out if you enjoyed this type of content. But equally, let us know what you'd like us to do when it comes to the Brownlow medal, because the best part about the internet is I can find just about anything. The best part about books is I can find just about anything. So let us know anything, any weird, wacky, wonderful questions you'd like answered, something more modern, something really far back, something in the intervening years, or should we have a look at the 1950s, talk about some of those players that don't get the credit they deserve because they were in that unfortunate period of time for the VFL. But Liam, that's all we have for this deep dive. Thank you for going through it with me.
No, thank you for allowing me to go through it with you, Jesse. I'm very appreciative